Just in case you're not sick of our faces, we're back for round 2
Howdy, howdy.
of celebrating Reboot Hiring. Book
Reboot
launch
hiring
party
it is.
2.
Launch party 2. Well, listen, let's get some of these folks into the wing. Debbie's
Let's
today.
do it.
Let's get Dirk into the wing as well, so they can
Let's see
start
if they come on.
joining.
Thank you for joining us.
And
If you're coming in
Ben.
for a second time, this is very fast, fluid, fun conversation. It's meant to be like a party. It's a little structured. It's mostly unstructured. It's just a bit of fun so we can talk about Reboot Hiring and celebrate all the beautiful people who contributed and pre-ordered and just gorgeous. And let's see who jumps in. I'm excited to see.
Well, I'm already pulling people in.
Wow, she's in. Debbie's doing payroll.
Hey, Debbie.
Hello. Oh, maybe
Hey,
she
Debbie,
can't hear
can you hear us?
No.
Oh, I don't know. No, microphone's not on yet.
That's very serious.
Yeah, very focused. Well, this may be book launch 2 for you and I, but this is book launch 1 for our for our US
who we can hear. Okay, so we can hear her clicking on her keys.
Yeah, 100%. It's just kind of like
she muted us. I might have to mute her.
Idea. I'm going to put her back in the wing for a minute.
Put her back in the wing.
Put her back in the wing for a minute.
Oh my God, mute her.
I am. Yeah. There we go.
That's hilarious.
Yeah,
so Debbie's typing.
So Debbie's definitely typing. That is some serious typing right there.
That is some serious typing. That is
but welcome everyone to the book launch for Reboot Hiring. Book launch 2, yes. And it gives us a bit of an opportunity to delve into, yes, the book and the intent of the book, but actually more about the person behind the book. Which is you, Katrina Collier.
Where are our guests?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you can quickly default to guests, but we're going to keep them in the wing for the moment, and we will bring them in just a second to join the party. But what I wanted to do is kick off with a couple of questions specifically for you. And the first one is really around, so if we contextualize this for everybody, the Robot Proof Recruiter was written back in 2019. You're going to show second edition. I'm going to show first edition.
It's like we planned this.
Yeah, it's like we planned it. And I was just curious to know when Reboot Hiring kind of became a kernel of an idea. You know, because ultimately some people might be like, look, I've written one book, that's good. I'm an author, I'm a published author, bang, done. Where and what was the genesis for Reboot Hiring? When did it start to kind of materialize?
This is when I wish Toby Colshaw was here, because I keep telling him he'll write another book and he's like, no, haven't got over the last one. It's when you get to the point you have got over the last one. And then they start brewing. I mean, it's the only way to describe it. It's like they brew and you're like, oh, I need to get this out of my body. And I think that's what makes a writer. It's like that feeling. And I know earlier on the first one I was talking about, like my memoirs, the same thing. It brewed up and I needed it out of my body. But it was also because when I wrote The Robot Proof Recruiter, I just realized how incredibly important the intake strategy session is, which I've now renamed the recruitment alignment meeting because, I just keep changing my mind. But just how incredibly important that is for the entire process. Like the beginning of the process is so important. And I was looking around kind of going, well, I've been bleating at TA. I've been asking recruiters to do this. And it's like they're hitting a wall all the time. What if I wrote something for them that they can just give their managers, write something for the other side? So coming into 2023 was when I decided I was going to write it. It's just, it took until this year to actually write it. But I thought I want to write everything they say. And I looked, because when you put together a book proposal, which I did and then submitted to Wiley, thanks to Shireen Daniels, I must thank her. You have to look at your bookshelf. You have to look at what else is written for managers out there about hiring. And there's very little out there, but there was nothing written about the recruitment alignment meeting, talent acquisition, what it is, why it matters, why partner, and nothing about how to articulate who they need to hire and then the costs of their behavior. Like all the isms and phobias and all that kind of stuff, like how that impacts hiring. So out it came. But that's probably, I got an itch to write something. And honestly, I kind of wrote it as the book they could sort of hit their managers with, literally go, just read this when they're frustrated, when they're like going, why are you making this so hard? It doesn't need to be this hard. It is just recruitment. It's not that complicated. Read this and you'll understand. It was, maybe don't hit them with it. Maybe slide it onto their desk.
Exactly. Yeah. I was going to say, we're trying to frame, obviously framing this as a learning and development tool, not
it is, but I was frustrated.
So from an author's perspective, I'm going to keep mentioning that author.
Okay. Yes.
I know that's not a title you're 100% comfortable with, but getting more and more comfortable.
Now.
You are now.
No, I am now.
Good. So what was different writing Reboot Hiring comparative to the Robot Proof Recruiter? What did you discover about yourself as a writer second book?
Well, the first time, so the reason that Glenn's saying about the whole author thing is that I didn't expect to be an author. And I did tell this story earlier, so sorry if you're hearing it a second time, was that I was in a workshop with Karen Skidmore and she did a meditation and she guided us forward 12 months to look back over the previous 12 months, what had happened. And I saw a fully written book. I was like, I'm sorry, what? I had no plans to be an author. I had no plans to write a book. And then Kogan Page came to me and asked me if I'd like to write a book. Thanks to Perry Timms, he sent them my way. And I wrote out my thinking. And obviously, as you know, there's 70 plus voices in it. I think there's about 80 in the second edition. And I just wrote out the process and the thinking, and you're putting your opinion out in black and white. So when I sent it off to the publisher, when I knew it was complete and I sent it over to Kogan Page, I'm like, it's done, right? It's ready to go. I sobbed for a good hour, maybe 2, can't remember. It was a really long time, like full on ugly cried, because I felt so unbelievably vulnerable that I had just written out my opinion of recruitment and how to do it better for the world to critique. Literally could go, well, wow, did you see she wrote that there? I mean, who does she think, and it was unbelievably vulnerable. However, thankfully, you all seem to like it a bit and still got a 4.5-star rating on Amazon, which I'm quite proud of. And then because you bought so many copies, along came the second edition. So, and still you guys like it. Thank goodness. Thank goodness. So the difference was I came to believe that people like my opinion, they like my writing, and they want to hear more. So when I wrote Reboot Hiring and I sent it off, it was like, there you go, take that. And it was a really different energy. It was like, they need to read this. I'm sick to death of the way that talent acquisition is being treated. I've written this really for the poor job seekers in the hiring process who are getting so mistreated. Oh, someone's got a very loud keyboard there.
Yeah, exactly. If you're in the wing at the moment, if you're
Debbie,
in the wing,
yourself.
Just mute yourself for the moment.
Mute Debbie. That's going to be Debbie.
Yeah, that's Debbie.
God, that poor keyboard. What did she do to it? Bless her. Sorry, can you tell I'm a highly sensitive person, particularly with hearing? So the difference is the incredible confidence. But again, I got lots of voices in here. There's 60 plus voices in here because I didn't want to have anyone go, and when did you last recruit, Katrina? Because
always,
it's been a while. I might spend my time working with TA teams, but I'm not sitting on the tools recruiting. So I wanted to make sure it mattered. And I really wanted to package up everything I hear from those teams and give you a voice. So I wanted to make sure it was right, hence all of the extra voices. It's always about voice with me, isn't it?
And on that note,
how are you getting on with all these wonderful people?
Well, I'm gonna invite a few in from the wing now to the stage. I can see Debbie, I can see Juliet, I can see Dirk, but I don't know
some
if
might
he's...
want to come on. Maybe they're not accepting.
Well, there you go. Bang.
Dirk's
look at that.
got my book sitting there, which is hilarious.
Well done, Dirk.
Debbie, can you hear us? Debbie.
No, I take that as a no. Juliet,
can you hear
we
us?
can see you.
Yeah.
Definitely.
I don't know what's going on with Debbie. We might need to.
Yeah.
That's so weird.
I'm gonna
Debbie,
pop her back in the wing for the second.
Yeah, something's wrong with her headset.
Julia.
Maybe it's not working.
Hi, do you hear me well? I don't
Yes.
know. That's great.
Hey,
Oh no,
Nice to
who's
meet you.
that then?
That's Julia.
That's
I'm going to
Julia.
invite
Bring
her
Julia
in.
in.
Let's
Yeah.
try.
Yay!
Yay!
Hi. Nice to
Okay.
meet you. We were chatting
Oh,
with
this is
Katrina the other day about the
Well,
book.
nice to meet you
welcome,
both.
welcome. So I think it would be only fair for these individuals that have obviously pre-ordered Reboot Hiring to fire
Or in
some
it.
questions. Yeah, exactly.
Juliet has in it.
Fire some questions at the author. So
Oh,
Juliet or
whoever.
Julia. Actually, Julia
And Juliet, yes.
Yes,
Juliet.
exactly. Yeah.
Juliet, you're muted. We don't hear you.
Yeah.
So
Well, Julia,
see the
that
muted
means
sign.
you get to kickstart.
Okay. So
Oh no, this is scary.
I'm sorry. I will introduce myself first. So I'm Julia.
Hello.
I'm the executive manager. I'm in recruiting for 9 years. So I'm in Poland right now, but I'm Ukrainian. And I'm working globally with different countries, Europe, Latin America. So not only with Poland. And I'm a big fan of the first book. That's why I just saw the book, and I even didn't read full description. I just ordered. And the stickers also go into me, so I'm waiting still for the stickers, and I'm still waiting for the book. It will be on Monday, so I'm here to just know more about the book and about the reasoning behind it, because we all know how hiring managers can be, how assholes sometimes. But it's interesting for me what you wanted to get there to understand about the hiring managers and what you want to create for the recruiting world, and for them to understand how hard it is in recruitment.
Yes.
And it's interesting what's behind it.
My thinking behind it is, the thing is that a lot of it, human resources, I think I said this earlier as well, has been around since the 1950s in many guises, personnel, whatever you want to call it. Do we all really know what HR does? There's a lot of us who
controversial.
go, what do they do? Well, I have no idea what they do. And I used to run Disrupt HR in London, and I say that to my HR folk, I'm like, what do you guys do? Because I only ever was policed by them, right? So for me, in my work experience, I don't know. But they're quite an old function. You kind of got some idea what sales does and marketing does, but what does TA? I don't understand talent acquisition. What does that mean? So I think as a function, managers and leaders don't really understand, what it is you do and what you're about. And they do genuinely think it's an admin. Like the CVs just float down from the sky and you just send them over and everyone just starts working for us. So I have spent 2 entire chapters demystifying what talent acquisition is and, giving some of the tips, like if I was hiring a talent acquisition professional, this is what I would expect them to have over and above the usual sourcing skills and things like that, to try and make the case, especially that you're not a cost center or an admin function.
Yeah. We have a separation within the company, also the admin and developers, so.
Yeah, right. And it's just like that we are the, well, I say we, because I still feel like I work in TA, but you are the people that recruit the people for the company, and therefore you decide the fate of that company. Because if you're only attracting, and because you're doing the initial engaging and wooing, right? And if that's bad, if you're not engaging great people, well, then the company's going to fail. And it's like, but why are we treated as a cost center and an admin function? It's just dumb. So anyway, that's a lot of the motivation is to make the case. Debbie, can you finally hear us?
Yeah. God. I was like,
we could hear you because, my God, do you know how to use a keyboard? I'm going to buy Debbie a silent keyboard.
One of those kind of like Formula One keyboards.
They're really clicky. Juliet, do you have a question? You're in here, of course. Oh, you're on mute, lovey.
Yeah, we don't hear you, unfortunately.
Oh, no.
I'll tell you what, Juliet. Go out, come back in again.
Try the settings.
100%.
Yeah, or come back.
Yeah. That's probably the easiest way.
We'll get Debbie in because Debbie's on payroll.
Yeah.
I've just got to find.
How you doing, Debbie? You good?
I'm doing well. Nice
How's
to
Austin?
see you.
Austin, Texas.
It's really good. Best state in the union.
Yeah. Yeah, just for everybody.
Is it like a blob of blue in the middle of a whole load of red, or should I not bring that up this early in the conversation?
I think I'm too
Don't
young.
answer
It's too early for me to figure it out yet.
Yeah.
I just
Okay.
have stayed in my own little sunshine-filled bubble, and that's pretty great.
Brilliant.
The weird thing is you have set your background up exactly the same, though, haven't you, as what it was?
It's kind of the same.
Almost
It's kind
the
of the
same.
same. It
Almost the
smells
same.
bright in here. I need more sunshine, like the. But
I
I
know.
can't
Just for context,
I am definitely going to see you
Debbie's
next
just
time I'm in
moved.
Austin.
get over
Yeah,
it.
everybody.
Yeah.
Where did you move from again?
Fort Wayne, Indiana.
Right. So really different. It's exciting. I'm excited. I'm probably more inclined to go to Austin, so I will see.
Yeah,
you.
you're definitely more inclined. There's all kinds of stuff to do, and conferences and concerts, and yeah, it's good.
Just to Austin. It's weird.
I've never left the Midwest, like
No.
permanently. So this is a big deal.
Wow.
There is a saying though, isn't there? It's like keep Austin weird. That's like a
Yes.
bumper sticker and stuff like that, right?
Yeah,
I remember
yeah.
that because
It is
my wife
good.
and I went on honeymoon in Austin, Texas.
Oh, amazing.
Yeah.
Oh, Joyce. Yeah.
So it's pretty cool. Pretty cool. Anyway,
My-
I digress.
My favorite thing is Pete's Dueling Piano Bar. So when I come back, that's where we're heading.
Yes.
All
that's
right,
really
we'll
cool.
make a date.
I love that. That was so much fun. Upstairs, though, I've got to be away from all the hens. And so, anyway, back to you. Right. I have a question, Debbie, because you contributed to the How to Articulate the Need chapter with your amazing question. Do you remember your question? Do I need to?
Yeah.
Your one about if it was one of your loved ones.
Yeah,
going
if
to-
someone you loved was applying for a job here, what would you warn them about?
Good
When
question.
you very first thought of that question and asked that question, I think you might need to repeat it. I think someone just said they couldn't hear it.
Oh,
Wait.
yeah. If someone you loved was applying for a job here, what would you warn them about?
Oh, I love that question. When you first thought of the question, did you have any apprehension asking it? Because I find recruiters have great questions and then don't want to ask it. And it's kind of crazy.
I wasn't really born with that kind of a filter. I just ask it. See what?
Absolutely love that.
And so far, it's probably the most productive question because it's the one no one sees coming. So they don't have a canned response, and then they really kind of think for a second, and you can watch them thinking about how to answer this one. And so look, everybody discovers eventually how toxic an environment is. It doesn't take long,
Yeah.
but I feel like if you warn me as a recruiter, if you warn me what I'm getting myself into, and then I choose it.
Yeah.
Now that's on me. I'm making that choice. It's a cognitive, data-driven, informed decision. I'm saying, I've seen these skeletons in the closet, and I'm not that frightened by them. I think they're all right. We can manage this. It might be worlds better than the environment you're coming from. And I think honesty is refreshing.
Yeah. And they might, and again, they might go, oh my God, I love the fact you've got these problems. Let me come in and help you fix them. Like, why not?
That's right. Yeah. But you're at least leaving with honesty and transparency. And so then it doesn't damage the relationship when I've placed you. And then you're like, man, you knew, my other job was okay. And now you brought me into this. I'm out
of here.
Horrible. Yeah, they're going to find out. So,
and they're not going to send you any referrals. They're not going to, of people, or in your case, clients. Like it's a
and they might even hate you a little bit.
The recruiters are afraid to tell the truth because they want to keep the candidates. And for example, if you have a legacy project, my also wrote to say, yeah, this is legacy. You will have a shift here. You will have a 24/7 here. So because you don't need to get to the end of the interview process and to understand understands that the person is like, oh no, I am quit, So it's also our biggest problem, and recruiters, especially junior middle ones, they're just afraid to tell the truth and to like, oh no, let's just take care of the candidate, it's great, everything perfect, butterflies.
And that becomes a downstream, that becomes a retention issue.
Yeah,
exactly, which is super expensive. Failed recruitment and retention is so expensive. So you have to, Julia, you have to give those baby recruiters the Debbie's question. Oh, don't call them that, by the way. That was very unprofessional.
Don't call them that. Hey, Ben. Ben's on the stage now.
Ben,
he's joined us.
Made the best video about my book ever.
That could have gone either way. I wasn't sure how that was going to be received, but thank you.
Oh, no, my God. I laugh at everything. It's all good. How are you this fine day?
I'm very well, thank you. I'm very well. How are you?
I'm good. That was a bit of sarcasm about the British weather. It has to be said. I don't know what's going on here.
We just had an absolute downpour, although like typical British weather. Now the sun's shining and it's all seasons in one day again.
Welcome to the UK, folks. Something you won't probably experience in Austin, Texas at all, really.
I think they're getting pretty wacky weather now, though.
I was just going to say, we've actually had lots of storms. It's been really cool. Yeah.
I see, the storms in the UK, the storms in the UK aren't cool. The storms in the UK are just like, oh, it's a storm. We don't get that amazing lightning in the sky and stuff that you want to go and sit and watch.
I really miss the proper, like, Australian thunderstorms. I do miss that here. When you just get like, there was the clap of thunder. Okay, whatever. That's it. It's done. Like where's the rest of it? Mr. Phillips, you're on page 197. Of course, I know you're quite upset about the fact that you're quoted with other people. But you're talking about actually employer advocacy rolls on quite beautifully from what we were just talking about as well, like people starting and then not staying and not being happy. Yes. What led you into what you're doing now? How did you get into your little corner?
What led me into what I'm doing?
What are you doing now, actually?
That's a great question. What am I doing? I'm still answering that question. What am I doing and what do I want to do? The two questions I've never been able to really answer. So I am in between roles. I'm about to start a new one, although I wasn't intending to, but they approached me. I was doing my own thing, just through necessity. Bumpy career over the last couple of years, like many people. A couple of layoffs in the last 2.5 years. Not a competition I'm trying to win, but I seem to be doing very, very well at it. And I thought, sod this for a game of soldiers. Having been laid off from a huge company and a scale up, I thought, is anywhere safe? And nervousness of starting my own business because of lack of security with a young family and bills and mortgage. And an old friend who's a career coach slapped me around the face figuratively and said, well, working for someone else hasn't proven very secure, so why don't you just give it a go? So I started doing that. And as you know, I'm quite prolific on LinkedIn. Sorry about that, for those of you whose the algorithm populates your feed with my content. And then someone approached me, but it seemed like a good opportunity. And I thought, hey, I'm a glutton for punishment. Let's give it one more roll of the dice. So that's what I'm doing.
Third time lucky. You'll be fine.
Well, yes. Well, actually, it would be fifth if you look at my whole career.
Damn it. I was trying to be optimistic for you.
Yeah, maybe I should start taking it personally. But anyway, so I do background in lots of things around HR and communication. But I've kind of found my resting place within employer branding, recruitment marketing, talent attraction, with a detour around learning and development, leadership development, culture transformation, and consumer marketing throughout my career as well.
Interesting.
Yeah.
It's slightly different from the rest of us in there.
Yeah. There's a question though. Do you find that? No,
we know Glenn drops when Glenn does questions. They're like really thoughtful.
It's the question with the stroke of the beard. I thought this.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's just a discussion point. I think is there a kind of inflection point in a recruiter's career where they move out of essentially, kind of like day-to-day kind of recruiting, 360 recruiting, and they move into that kind of strategic role where it think, you kind of think more around branding, processes, kind of strategy, projects, etc. And I wonder, to that point around, because we discussed it on the book launch earlier, there's some incredible people still on the market looking for opportunities within talent acquisition and recruitment. And I just wonder why that is. Is there not enough appetite for kind of strategy process and kind of like really good best practice now? And is it more transactional?
Well, I can only talk to my experience. So what I found, so I'm quite open. I'm quite senior. I'm looking for head of and director level roles. So obviously in the triangle of opportunities, when you're starting off, the base is wide and there's more opportunity, and as you go off, that narrows off. And I don't know, this is just instinct, so this isn't rooted in data, but where I was positioning myself with my consulting work is a few things. As a senior, kind of coming in and doing project-based work, or running off and kind of doing retainer, so 1 or 2 days a week coming in, or a director for hire. Now that one's interesting because, again, going with my instinct, a lot of companies I was speaking to, because of the economic climate, couldn't afford or couldn't justify the cost of a full-time senior employer brand, quote unquote, talent attraction expert on their books. Not talent acquisition, purely on the branding marketing side. What they could do, and this is reflective of some of the jobs you see advertised in this space at the moment, people are looking for quote unquote employer brand managers. And they're not. What they're looking for is people who are a whiz on social media and content to come and do some employer branding stuff in that team. So I was kind of positioning myself as I can come in, and that's then where employer branding gets a bad rep, because people think it's just pretty pictures on social media and websites.
Isn't it?
I'm going to pretend I didn't hear that, Katrina. And but there's no strategy. There's no
payback for that video.
There's nothing. There's nothing connected to an overarching strategy that's done in a measurable way that you can attribute to employer branding and talent marketing, because you're giving it to junior people who don't necessarily know how to do that.
So there is a point there, Ben, which I think is really around the kind of education, both in terms of the kind of talent acquisition side, but equally the hiring team, which obviously loops us neatly back to this little beauty, which essentially, ultimately, if your hiring managers are going to have a real understanding of the value of employer branding, senior level individuals, strategic approach to hiring, they do need to understand the fundamentals of how to hire well, and actually be more strategic about it and less transactional. And I think this is where kind of Reboot Hiring really acts as a learning development tool, because you're almost you're getting bombed to there, little video bomb. It's an actual
BBC interview.
tool.
My kids coming in. Go away.
So when you're a senior level individual and you're kind of going in there, it's not just about telling the hiring managers what to do. It's kind of almost like, well, look, you're smart people. You want to educate yourself. Here's something I would recommend you read. And you can even mark out the particular chapters you want them to focus on straight away, because if you know what the problem is,
197,
you can start to sort of signpost them to that, as opposed to giving them just the book and going, read this. You're like, this book's going to help you in a lot of ways, but you need to start on this chapter or this chapter and just read that, and then let's reconnect.
And I think what I haven't done is I haven't necessarily gone into employer brand, because it's not my strength. But what I have done is I've talked about that the market isn't theirs. Like, companies still think it's their market. It's like, no, as long as there's an internet and people can see there's other jobs, if you treat them really, really badly in the hiring process, they won't choose you. Doesn't matter what you do. But how all of their bad isms and phobias and behavior ends up on the internet, which really then would lead to, that's why employer branding matters. But I haven't gone into it per se. But what I have done, which you might appreciate, Ben, is really asked right at the beginning, should you be hiring? Because I'm absolutely sick of the fact, you've had 2 layoffs in the last, 2 years? And I'm just tired of that. I'm tired of hearing that companies are hiring and they're not really thinking it through. And then suddenly, and the long-term damage potentially to mental health of that. Hi,
Hey, Juliet. Hey, Yamislava. You're both on stage. Hopefully, we can
don't
hear
feel like
you.
you have to stay. By the way, this is like if you need to go and you've got things to just bounce off. This is not. You don't have to stay until we stop talking. You might be here all night.
Just finally, from me, it's interesting hearing you say about the recruiters earlier about they don't ask those pertinent questions. They build the perfect picture. The people come in and realize it's all a load of BS and it's toxic, and then you've got a problem with retention and turnover. And that's where I think the challenge with employer branding is. There's still that misconception that people think employer branding is about selling. Now, depending on your definition of selling, there could be obviously secondhand car sleazy sales through to really sophisticated sales. But selling puts you in a mind of at any cost. So you're always selling the butterflies and the unicorns and the rainbows instead of actually revealing the realities of what it's actually like to work here, the good and the bad, the rough with the smooth. And that's really hard to do if you're a junior recruiter. But where employer branding can support is to equip those people with the talk tracks, the sound bites, the balanced, to be more open up front. But then you try getting that past a senior executive who's nervous and paranoid and wants to,
but is it
paint
that,
everything
or
with pretty pictures?
Is it that, or is it what I think it is, which I've seen happening, and I apologize for anybody I'm about to offend. Well, you said I'm expensive. I'm a senior hire. They can't afford me. They can't afford that, employer branding, but they can't afford TA directors at the current time. Like what I've seen happen is, they've been fired, they've been rehired. Sorry for everyone who's heard this 100 times. I keep saying it. And then they were fired again and kind of rehired, but we're not really hiring really expensive, experienced TA directors into these roles. We're hiring quite junior people into those roles because we can't afford them, basically. And then that means the team doesn't have a really strong lead who is developing them, who is giving them the confidence to ask that tough question. I'm seeing that a lot. I'm, of course, being very vocal about it, which is probably costing me work, but, I'll continue being vocal about it because I think it's a disservice to the company. I get why the leaders are doing it. I think they get less pushback. They get to continue their bad behavior. They don't see that self-sabotaging. They don't see the cost implication of that. I see that. I don't know. Maybe I'm being difficult. Feel free to chime in, everybody.
Yeah. Juliet, now that we can...
Katrina's
Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Wonderful. I was saying there was no way I was going to miss this party. I'm in a party and I'm invited. Hell yeah.
Brilliant indeed. And Katrina was saying you're in the book as well.
Yeah.
Yes. I've forgotten what page you're on now. I had it a minute ago. 38.
My book is still on its way. It got stuck at customs.
Oh, is that because I said it was a document?
Yeah.
I don't know. We'll find out.
Technically, Amazing. It is a document. So you're on page 38. On top of the misconception that managers often think anyone can recruit, they also underestimate the expertise required to be a good talent acquisition partner.
Ooh, love
TA
that.
has evolved, into a strategic function that can have a far deeper impact than just, in inverted commas, staffing your team. Once this misconception changes, everything changes.
There seems to be quite a narrative around that at the moment, isn't there? In terms of, TA as a function and typical kind of measures, time to hire, cost per hire. And the interesting one that I find activates the most debate is quality of hire and how that's kind of measured. And I think that possibly links into your piece around kind of TA as a strategy function. Juliet, how would you explain that to a hiring manager who's kind of new to hiring, just been promoted? You're now going to engage for your first couple of hires. TA is a strategic function. And they're like, oh, what do you mean by that?
Okay. I would tell them, imagine you go to the opera to watch a ballet, and it's wonderful, right?
Ooh,
but what you see seems easy. When you see the dancers dancing, it seems easy. But why does it seem easy? Just because they have actually worked very hard for this choreography, but also because of the whole years of work they've put into becoming a good dancer. And I think in this way, I like to compare that to TA, because what they see from us, it looks easy. But why does it look easy? Because we had a good kickoff meeting, because we have a good partnership, and because we've been recruiting for years and we know what we're doing. So I like metaphors. I think it brings people in, and I think this one is a good one.
I can already imagine me doing Swan Lake. It's kind of
so many comments.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
It can be made a metaphor, though. You're totally safe with it.
Oh no,
Yeah.
Gwen's just being facetious. What you said is so good. Actually, I love that analogy. I shall be stealing it going forward. Yeah. And I definitely need to write a second edition of this already. I've had so many things thrown my way. I'm like, damn it, wish I got that in there.
Yeah.
Oh, Ben's gone. Ben, don't feel like you have to stay, by the way. Like anyone who has to go,
I have to pop out in 5 minutes because I have a kid coming home and I will have to open the door, but I'll be back and be right back.
Ben's on the phone. But yeah, I think you're right. It's kind of
really boring. I'm just going to tune out for a while.
I think you're right though, Julia. It's really about illustrating the amount of skills and experience they're about to kind of tap into. It's not a service like turn on, turn off.
It's
just fly down from the sky.
But again, if TA is a cost center function, then you have more risks to be treated as such within a company, within a structure.
But and I think that's why I wrote this.
Sales manager is I tell them, okay, then I can sell too. I'm good at selling, so bring me in your team. And then it was like, of course not. I'm like, yeah, I'm a recruiter. You're a seller. So you cannot recruit the way I recruit, the same way I cannot sell the way you sell. So,
yeah.
And usually if you compare it to the fact that it's your job, the same way that being a sales manager is theirs, it's easier for them to understand. But that's just for them.
I like that. I've definitely tried to write this in the kind of speak that anybody who thinks it's a cost center will understand why it's not. Like it's very much like, yes, the function costs money. Yes, this team have salaries, whoopie-doo-dah. However, this is like where they save you money. This is how, by not funding them properly, so they can't set up properly, they don't have the processes in place, it costs you money. Like it's a false economy with all of those failed hires and bad reputation, lost clients, etc. So I've really tried to hit in on everything.
Forget the strategic impact it has on the whole company. Currently, I'm working for a startup and I'm actually recruiting everyone in one country. So basically, the future of the company, I know it's not just me, I'm recruiting with the hiring manager, but it's still, I take that as a responsibility. And what function has this strategic importance and weight within a company, right?
Yeah.
So I think this is also something that people tend to forget, especially if you're in bigger organizations. It's not as easy to see the impact, but we shouldn't forget that.
No,
definitely.
It's lovely staffing up a startup, watching them come in and grow and assuming that they're doing it sensibly. That's another conversation.
Whole other conversation right there.
So I do it sensibly.
Yeah. So you push back and make sure that you should be hiring and
but
over hiring.
Great. They are very mature in the way they handle TA. Like they started having a TA team when there were 15 people only in the company. So they recognize the importance very early. And that's also, I asked some questions during my interview to make sure that they understood the strategic part of TA, because especially when you enter a company like that, you want to make sure that you work with people who are on board with it. So one of my first questions was, why do you already have a TA team? You're 15 people. Why do you already have a TA team? So I think it's important to ask this question.
And what was their answer? What did they say?
They said because for them it's a strategic function and they want to make sure that we start building a brand, not only through the product, but also through not only the employer brand, but the employee proposition, which is kind of internal brand, if you wish. And they wanted to make sure it's a company, like it's important for them to control the production as well. So also in the product, and they wanted to do the same in bringing in TA to make sure that we create this unity. And I thought it was great.
That's cool.
Love that. That's so cool. Imagine if more companies said that.
Well, imagine,
I mean, imagine if people read your book, maybe this would happen.
I know. My dream would be, this is really bad because it's like putting the onus on job seekers. But imagine if every job seeker had a shit experience, sent a copy of my book to the CEO of that company. Like imagine that they suddenly started going, what's this? Oh my God, is that what we're doing to people? Yeah. Because they're not being, that would be really cool.
Let's say hello to Yanoslava as well. She's sitting there patiently.
Yanni, I
Yes,
haven't seen you for
hello.
ages. How are you, lovely?
Yeah, Katrina, you look beautiful. Thanks for inviting me for the
Oh,
party.
thank you. That's so cool. Well, you're on page 12. Dun, dun, dun. You're talking about
Okay.
must-haves. Oh, you're talking about getting your managers to cut out must-haves. My favorite thing. Stop being ridiculous with your must-haves. Don't make me look for unicorns.
Oh, okay, yeah. Add some context to that.
You know, and they
What
go,
do we
I
mean
need
by
15
must-haves?
must-haves. Must-haves.
Yeah.
Must-haves. Yes. Okay. Yeah, that's typically something I fight with every day. Like the must-haves and like the overall like hiring managers to kind of really identify, okay, we are doing hiring, we are hiring a new person, but what do we want them to do? Because typically they just look at especially in engineering for Julia, Debbie, and the other people I usually recruit in engineering. So what typically I see is, okay, we use this tech stack, so we want them to know everything from the tech stack. We are mainly remote companies, so we want them to be super senior, super autonomous, on top of their game and stuff. So, but sometimes, really, the job that they are going to be doing on a day-to-day basis does not really require all of those skills, and not necessarily at the level that is like a mastery. Okay, they may have some knowledge or some understanding, or they may be open ChatGPT or open Google and read about it, and they will quickly grasp it. So this is like in the kickoff meetings, typically, like usually always start with what are the must-haves, and why do we have these as a requirement? How is this justified by the work they will be doing in short term and in long term? Because it's like they have a roadmap, but that roadmap, who knows in the next 1 year who will be in the company and who will be working on what. So how this person that we are now bringing on board and their competencies complement the other team members' competencies. And sometimes these open up bigger discussions who, it seems from my experience, most of the people haven't reached to the point to even ask themselves these questions. Okay, what is like the skill map of my team? And why do I want all those people to know everything? Because it actually, to me, creates a lot of frustration. I need to bring on board 30 people to hire potentially one. It's lengthy and it's exhausting. And definitely it does not improve the brand.
No. And I think it's so much of the time is because they kind of almost panic. I mean, we have a thing here in the UK called accidental managers, which is about 80% of managers are accidental, right? So they were a great engineer and they promoted them into management and they never trained them. So they don't know how to even manage their team, you know, or even cope with the role, let alone hire. So somebody resigns and they go, oh no, Glenn's resigned. Okay, I need a Glenn. And actually they don't. They need a Yanni going forward. They need something different, but they're looking backwards. And I've really tried in this to make them look forward with all of your questions that I've pulled in, and just like, can you look forward? Like, there's no point. Because when you, like say it was Glenn started, he started 3 years prior, he's gained a few skills along the way. So it's changed. The role's changed and they're just, So let's hope.
There's an interesting point there that Yanoslava makes, in so much as sometimes hiring managers, they'll lose a team member and they'll use it as an opportunity to really try and up level above the level they've never hired before within the budget they've currently got. So they'll be like, you know, most of our team are maybe 3 to 4 years tenured in this particular skill set. Let's see if we can get somebody with 6 years experience for the same money. You're just kind of like, and then the simple question is, okay, how did you benchmark your expectations? Well, I spoke to one of my pals who's just hired this person. You're like, okay, right. So there's a small frame of reference, right? And then suddenly when you realize there's this backstory to the job description they've presented you, you're like, okay, we probably need to recalibrate expectation here. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And
yes.
I think in a lot of, I was just going to
go
say, I think in a lot of cases too, managers who aren't terribly experienced, they always want to hire that A+ity plus person because they
The
feel
C-
like
role.
they're really, really talented people. It might help compensate for the fact that I don't really know what the hell I'm doing, and they'll know what to do. They'll know what they need to do. And the A+ity plus, they might get lucky and hire them, but A+ isn't sticking around long for this because they've got 19 recruiters tapping on their door.
Yeah, today I had a situation also that the hiring manager answered about the candidate after the interview, and he said, "Oh, he is perfect fit for this position, but he probably learned coding himself, so he didn't have any university, so I'm not sure about him." And I'm like, "Okay, but it was no requirements to have a technical education or something like that, because in the market it's a lot of people who learn on their own, and he is a senior Golang, and he knows his job pretty well, and I'm not sure because he didn't have any foundation from the university." So,
but he interviewed
if it's a requirement after the technical interview, so it was on the client side, and is any requirements for this? Because we had a kickoff before, you haven't mentioned it. No, but it's really good, for him to have it, because so yeah, love it as always.
But it's crazy, isn't it? Because I mean, from a candidate point of view, that really pisses me off. So when my sister decided to fold her business, so she'd been an event manager, event director for 20 years, and she was being interviewed. She doesn't have a degree, right? She has 20 years of actual experience running rings around half of the people that were interviewing her. And she would get that. She would get interviewed and then knocked back because she didn't have a degree. And she's like, "Why did you interview me? Why have you made me waste all my time?" And that's the bit that I really get really annoyed about. And actually, that goes back to Ben with employer brand. They then go write crappy shit all over the internet about the process because their time was wasted.
Doesn't this come into the intake meeting, or you've renamed it now?
Recruitment alignment meeting.
Recruitment
Whatever
alignment
I'm calling
meeting,
it this
where
week.
it's kind of almost
They're
like...
calling it kickoff. I should have called it that.
Yeah.
Recruitment alignment or kickoff meetings, whatever we call them, it seems to me that the real requirement starts to reveal after a couple of interviews later, when we see their biases, when they actually speak with people in reality and start to apply their judgment. Okay, now we need to say this is good, this is not good, this is good, this is not. And then we figure out in the process that actually we do need a university degree as mandatory, because the engineering director or hiring manager is coming from university, and he strongly believes deep down somewhere that this is kind of a proof to someone in his own way, but because it's accepted and most commonly accepted nowadays that people can be self-taught, so he does not want to exclude this, but his preference is leaning toward this. So sometimes with these kind of biases and hidden things, the intake meetings might be reviewed or redone, let's say, if we face some bottlenecks or a lot of candidates don't pass the interviews.
Do you then find, I guess you probably only need to have that experience with the manager once to realize they've got that. So I guess in the next time you're having an intake with them, you can really triple check do you need the degree? Do you need the qualification? Is this really necessary? What if I find a great applicant who's got 10 years of experience doing that skill at Facebook? Are you sure you're going to exclude them because they haven't got a piece of paper? It's...
And everything in writing.
Yeah, exactly. Always in writing.
It's fascinating. It's fascinating watching this still happening in the rise of the so-called skill-based hiring movement. You see so many people banging on about it. You'd think that everybody was doing it and were black belt second dans at it, but it's
not even close.
Not even close. And there's a recent study. I can't remember who did it. I remember it being quite credible sources. They did some research into who was doing skills-based hiring, and they labeled them as skills-based leaders, in name only, and backsliders. So there are a few companies who are doing it where they're removing degrees. They are doing it as it should be done based on skills. And there are those that are doing it in name only because they've realized that the company may have a mandate to apply skills-based hiring, but they haven't done the cultural transformation to train hiring managers to get over themselves when it comes to that.
Yes.
And then there are those, the
or
backsliders
assess
who
the entire
started it.
company.
Yeah, or the backsliders who have said they're doing it, but now they've reverted to a worse state where even more hires now over the university degrees than before trying to implement it.
Oh,
yeah. It's an interesting point, Ben. And
so
I think
there was. Sorry.
Sorry, go, Katrina. Go on.
Oh no, I was just going to say I interviewed Mireille, who's Mireille Lee, who works in talent acquisition at Test Gorilla, and I know Glenn's used their tests, and they had me on their webinar about skill-based hiring, and I said before I came on, I said, I just like to be quite clear that I'm not 100% sure about skill-based hiring because you know, what if the person has a 100% skill assessment and is toxic? So actually, they are very much of the belief, yes, use it for hard skills, not for personality. Short tests, always with feedback. And actually, she was talking about how she gets her hiring managers to reduce the must-haves because she's saying, no, these two tests are really similar. We're not making them do both. So which one? Which I thought was quite clever. But exactly like you're saying, Ben, it's like, where is it in the process? It has to be a value add to the candidate or they don't include it. And it can only be like those hard things. So they've had, for example, somebody self-taught search engine optimization, do a test, score really high, and they hired them because they were like, wow, look how brilliant this person is. No degree, no qualification. Actually, I think they're a doctor or something before. Complete career change. So it can work that way, but I see it being used like exactly like you just said. It's like messy. You've got to think about where you're using it. But one of the things I found quite worrying when I was writing Reboot Hiring was the company's kind of trying to recruit without recruiters by using these tests. And there's some interesting times ahead for TA if we don't up our value. Glenn, you were going to say something on
I was just curious, collectively, do you all kind of do a bit of an interviewer audit? So even the hiring manager, just ask them, okay, tell me about your interview success rate, how you approach interviewing and stuff like that. Because I find sometimes you'll have a hiring manager that has, to Jana's Lover's point, has all these must-haves, but actually they're not particularly skilled in interviewing. So actually the chances of them actually calibrating that correctly is probably a lot lower. And then sometimes you have these kind of interview loops where, say, for instance, you're hiring for a salesperson and they've got like somebody from product or engineering in the loop. And you're like, okay, why are they in the loop? Somebody from engineering, how are they going to inform a sales hire? And ultimately, worst case scenario, you don't hire a salesperson because the engineering person doesn't like their vibe. Well, they're not going to because they're culturally very different. So I was just curious as to whether you kind of reverse it on them. You're like, okay, cool. Those are your requirements in terms of job description. My requirements are, I want to know how good you are at interviewing and why you've put this interview team together, and start to reverse it that way.
The entire interview considerations chapter came about because of a conversation like this, by the way. Glenn Martin is the reason that chapter is in there.
Right. Okay, cool. Hey.
You know that. I told you that. Anyway, whatever. Now you can all answer his question.
Yeah.
I can say from my experience, because I'm working mostly with the technical interviewers, so of course they can be great engineers, but at the interviews they even like, okay, let's start from the test assignment. So no intro, no small talk. So inside it, because I was making the processes within the company right now, and I created the guideline, kind of video guideline for the interviewers that you need to have a small talk, tell about your experience. So they smile a bit, and then you can have it and tell the agenda, you know, like today we will have, and so on. So, and please don't just drop something out of nowhere, you know. So, and this guideline was spread through all the interviewers, and we have a feedback form after every interview. So the candidate give the score to the interview, and then we are reviewing. It's once a quarter to understand which interviewer is better, worse, to which we don't need to come back. So sometimes it's 5, sometimes all 2, or I didn't like or they were giggling out of my answers or something like that. So it really helped us to, and it was really great candidate, but he decided not to go forward because I gave not the right answers. They were like giggling on my answer with 20 years. And I was like, okay, and I gave the feedback to the tech leads because I'm sorry guys. I mean, I heard it and I said it to them. So, and we also got the additional feedback.
Those guys, they go over to Blind App. And they go on to Blind App and they say what company and they talk about. So some of the examples I've put in there about, like, you know, racism and I mean just horrific stuff that they just don't realize when they do that in an interview that ends up on the internet. And that's
it's what Ben was talking about earlier, how employer how employer
you're right. It is usually employer brand. You're right.
It does. It bleeds right into candidate experience because when people feel like they've been humiliated, like these folks laughing at my answer, if I'm humiliated, I am motivated to let everybody I know what jerks these guys are. I mean, I'm telling everyone. The blast.
Well, this is where we can. This is where we can hold so many toes to the fire. I remember reading many years ago when I was in recruitment in the late 90s.
To the fire?
Yeah. You haven't heard that expression before? We can hold toes to the fire. Okay.
That must be a British one.
Oh yeah.
So many. I was in recruitment late 90s, early noughties. And I remember reading a book by Lou Adler called Hire with Your Head. And some of the things that stuck with me. He talked about
there on the shelf.
Oh, is it? I remember one of the things that always stuck with me was people are very good at getting a job and people are very good at doing the job. And if you're lucky, they're both. And with the good at getting a job, he talked about the 4 A's. Most inexperienced recruiters hire people based on the 4 A's. Are they articulate? Are they assertive? Are they amiable? Are they attractive? And the more of those boxes they tick, the more chances are they'll get hired to the uninitiated, the untrained interviewer. Then you fast forward, I spent a lot of time in digital and tech, and then we talk about DEIB, diversity, equity, inclusive, belonging. In tech and digital, those who perform incredibly well at programming tend to be neurodiverse on the spectrum. So if you've got someone who's inexperienced, who hasn't been trained to overcome and see the 4A trap, who's interviewing someone who may be slightly Asperger's, who can't connect, but is a fucking brilliant programmer.
Exactly.
So all these things we talk about, everyone, great, but there's so much work still to be done there to train and educate around these things. So it's just how these thought leadership pieces all start colliding, and you can start holding people's toes to the fire to say, well, hang on. In one breath, we're saying we're DEIB and we're inclusive and neurodiverse, and then in the next breath, we're rejecting people because they may have a nervous tick, because they're slightly awkward, because they're neurodiverse, and now you've just rubbished them because of that. So
I always get concerned when you've got talent acquisition. Sorry, again, if I offend anyone, but talent acquisition doing the training of managers on interviewing, because the managers don't necessarily take it on board from TA. And that's it's worked in Julia's case. It's raised awareness, but it doesn't always work. So sometimes it's
didn't give them the choice. We just presented it and says that this is our rules, and we need to work on it. So,
which I get and is brilliant, but sometimes you can't even do that. You can't set rules. I've seen it, and it can be a cultural imbalance. So it's not necessarily here in Britain, for example. It depends on what country, where they wouldn't actually take that on board. They wouldn't be prepared to listen. And so it's like that TA's got to build itself up to have that value and the strategies for them to go, yes, I will do what Julia said, because she bloody knows her stuff. and I know damn well it'll be to the benefit of the company. That's where I get concerned. But it's so important. It's so needed, and more of it's needed.
I think you're referring to the founder or leader that fully endorses the talent acquisition people playbook, but thinks it doesn't apply to them. So it's like, it's quite literally like, yes, that's a really great idea, Julie. Let's roll that out across the business. But when I interview, none of those rules apply to me.
Yeah. I'm going to go hire the 4As.
And then they could be the ones that end up torpedoing whether that particular individual joins the business or not. Because they're like, it's been a really great process up until the point where I met that C-suite leader or founder. And then that is one of the most random interviews I've ever been in, asking questions that I've been asked before. I'm repeating myself. They're asking me these left field Google questions, like how many lampposts are there in the UK and all this sort of stuff. And you're just like, it has to be a unified approach across the business, and it applies to everybody. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I think,
and somebody did actually ask that in an interview. I think it was how many bars of soap are in hotel rooms across the UK. I actually asked somebody that in an interview for it was like I think it was like a data analysis role, and the guy just sat there like.
I was in an interview once where the guy I was interviewing.
Parking meters are there in Chicago?
Yeah, that's something
project
like that.
Management. It's a project manager position. I was like,
see, my trouble is my mouth. I would have just gone, what a wanker of a question. Like, just,
why are you asking that?
I literally would have responded with my thought with no filter. I would have just, because I would have gone from at that moment, I would not want the job. Yeah. Like the second that question was asked, so I would burn it by going,
as a candidate, you don't want to work with these kind of people.
But the worst thing was, genuinely, he said, do you want some prompts? And then just sat there and built up this really awkward tension, as it was really clear this interviewee had no idea where to start with that question. And it was like this awkward silence. And he went, do you want some prompts? Realize that question has not landed well, right? Your interview is going south rapidly. And this
here's the prompts. I'm now leaving the building. Nearest exit.
I was in an interview once. I was interviewing with someone, and the guy I was interviewing with, he just came out with something like, would you rather fly a horse or fight a dinosaur? It was so left field and so it wasn't that specific. It wasn't that exactly, but it was something like, it was fighting the dinosaur was definitely part of it, because you don't forget that. But I don't remember what the first part was. And I remember, because I'm like you, Katrina. My poker face is rubbish. I'm a heart on sleeves kind of guy. And I just turned around and went, I think I mouthed the words, what the fuck, to him. But what do you expect to get from that? You know, oh dear. Anyway.
True story. I very nearly didn't get my start at Spring Technology, which is actually where I met Glenn and got the foundation of my recruitment skills. Because in the very first interview, which I had with Richard Norris and Steve Sims, we got to the end and we were talking about stupid interview answers or questions or something. And I went, oh, what a wank. Didn't think anything of the fact I swore. It's not really a big swear word. I'm Australian. That's nothing. And they were like, well, we're not sure we can pass you over to Mel Agostini. Mel Agostini was made into this incredibly scary woman who would interview me. And well, she and I mean, we did not have an interview. We sat and we talked about all sorts of stuff except recruitment. And she totally hired me. But on the fact that I said wank. It was just to this day. So I might not be talking to you right now if they'd said no, because I said that one word.
Well, knowing Richard Norris as I do, I'm highly surprised. maybe you didn't swear enough, basically.
No, you just swore in the interview and you didn't know you did. And I'm like, because I don't really think that's a swear word.
There's a lot of swearing in interviews, I've noticed lately. People are way more casual about even dropping F-bombs in pre-screen.
F-bombs in
the
US is fine.
Yeah.
Like that was fine in the US. God is not fine in the US.
I don't know if I would use it ever in an interview. I mean, I feel like that's too much. That's too much. You could say asshole maybe in an interview.
Genuinely though, when I'm in the US though, the biggest I get when I'm there, particularly if I'm on stage, is if I say God. So actually F-bombs don't really get much of a response. It's really weird. And you just go, oh God, no. You can almost hear the, oh please. Yeah. Good job you don't live in England, because you know we're a potty mouth lot.
They would hate me.
Say that again.
I said, yeah, they'd hate me.
So Dirks just said, jag off works in PA.
Oh yeah.
Why is Dirk there but not there? He hasn't come in at all, has he?
No.
Oh, Yanni, is Yanni?
Yeah, Yanis made a move. Yeah.
Ah, gotcha.
I'll tell one more interview story, and this is from the interviewee side, and I think this is actually illustrative of the time. So it was when we were at Spring Technology, and now I reflect on it through a very different kind of lens. But we used to send these kind of like let's call them software engineers. We used to send them in for interview for this kind of insurance client, and this one guy turned up for an interview. Two-person panel, hiring manager, and then one of the engineering team. They started the questions and they were like, okay, so could you talk us through this particular framework? He was like, absolutely, wait there. Pulled a book out of his bag, flipped to the chapter and started reading the actual, kind of like the actual process from the book, right? So they were like, is this guy serious on it? So they were like, okay, cool. And they asked another question. He was like, yeah, great question. Flipped through the chapters and read the answer back to them, textbook wise, right? They got to about the third question, and then the hiring manager was like, look, are you going to need the book all the way through the interview? And this guy was like, yeah, I do. Yeah. They didn't ask him anything more than that. So they just sort of said, look, day to day, you're probably not going to be able to use the book day to day. So let's wrap up the interview. Phoned us, and he was like, I thought it was a joke. I thought you guys had sent this person as a joke to kind of like, kind of just as a bit of fun. Wow. And obviously didn't get the job. Now, if you now put that through the lens of somebody who's neurodiverse, who will have the knowledge, will be able to do this day to day, but in a high pressure interview scenario, needs just to reference that. So they didn't even get past the point of like, okay, so you've read that out of the book. Let's ask some follow-on questions from that to sort of test whether that was just like his need for baseline, and then he had the knowledge beyond that. But at that time, take it, Ben. At that time, it was kind of almost like, well, this guy's he's a bit of a joker. But you fast forward now and perhaps we would have asked some very different
now
questions.
Now I feel bad for laughing. Damn, I knew that. I'd known that's where you were going.
Yeah, but this is the thing. We did.
What, though?
At the time, we laughed. We were like, oh my God,
I'm hiring that guy. Because you know what? He knows where to go to solve the problem.
Yeah.
You don't know the answer right away. But you need to have enough instincts to know where to go to get the answer that you don't have. Yeah. I'd say I'd have him.
This is the context difference, Debbie.
And clearly I'm shocking interviewer. See?
Well, back then, we laughed. We thought it was hilarious. Yeah. We were just like, oh, and every time a job like that came up, his profile would come to the top because he was well educated. He had a certification. He had a work history. And we're like, no, we're not sending that guy, right? Fast forward now to what we know now in the context of neurodiverse people and how interviewing should be better and more inclusive. That interview would have run completely different, but it was of the time. And, as much as you can feel kind of guilty for laughing, and I feel guilty at the time because ultimately I was just kind of like, I was like everybody else. Well,
ignorance.
We weren't aware enough.
Yeah.
Didn't ask enough questions.
Well, okay. So
we
I
were
didn't
collectively responsible.
Dirk's written in the comments, stutterers read to overcome the stammer. Well, I didn't know that. So actually, I've just learned something. And yes, I do feel bad for laughing. Yeah. At the same time, I probably would have laughed because I would have been a bit confused by the whole thing. Yeah. But I also laugh at the fact that actually the questions are like, do you know this protocol? Well, it's like, okay, so this is a memory test. And he's going, yes, I do. And like not doing a memory test. So actually, there's also that side to it. Yeah. But I guess it's the awkward and Sorry?
I said I agree with that 100% because so many times I see people do these tech screenings where they're asking somebody for a specific call function. And I'm like, God, why are you doing that? You know, like,
Yeah.
all they need to know is where to go to look that up. You know, people don't memorize call functions, and you know, especially if this is not something that they're using day in, day out. Where would you go to find this information? What are your sources for this type of? I mean, that's what I would say. So a guy getting out a book, to me, like I said, I'd be like,
Yeah.
well, he knows where to go for the information. I will.
Don't you think that's why these kind of calls are so important? You know, like I've just learned something, and actually Dirk's written some more here. So some people use braille notes to manage their nerves, like a teleprompter. I mean, that's amazing.
My son uses Velcro. He used Velcro under his desk. Yeah. When I was trying to like your comment about stuttering, Dirk, but I couldn't get the emoji. But yeah, that was the first thing I thought
Dirk
of
could
too.
come on screen. He's just hiding.
Yeah, once I had an interview for the recruitment position, like when I was a middle recruiter, like 3 years, 4 years, and they asked me which position you currently have. So I said that, yeah, I have like 7 positions right now. So can you retell the job description of that specific position for us? And I was like, whoa. And like I said, okay, this is a main skills. Like, no. So retell like experience with this tool, must have, nice to have. I was like, okay. And that time I went to the office and I've been waiting for 40 minutes for them because they had some meeting delay or something like that. I just started to work in their meeting room, and then they came and they were sitting in this way, like in front of me, like, hey girl, tell me something. And I remember it was the 5,000 people company, so huge company, you know, like super process bureaucracy, but they treat people in this way. And I was like, never in my life.
Wow.
No.
Yes.
I have a 20-minute limit. I have about 5 to 10 on a video call and 20 minutes my maximum in person. You keep me waiting, I walk out the door. I genuinely, I've always felt like that. It's like, because it just shows, 40 minutes. And 40 minutes feels like 2 hours when you're stressed. You know, you're all wound up. There's a story in Reboot Hiring, which you'll read, that just made me so friggin' angry. Somebody drove 3 hours to the interview, and he was in the lobby, foyer, whatever you'd like to call it this week, and the interview got cancelled 10 minutes before it was due to happen. And he then had a 3-hour drive back. And I'm like here in the UK, just the cost of the petrol alone made me angry at that thought. But it's the time, it's the stress, it's the dog sitting, the child sitting, the rearranging your life to go and to do that. There's no excuse for that. I'm really tough with time and cancellations. But I bet you wouldn't now, Julia. I bet you'd just be like, goodbye.
Well, I mean, it kind of lends itself to the question, are they serious about hiring for the role if they're prepared to let somebody wait 40 minutes? I mean, it's kind of almost like, you know, come on.
I mean, there can be exceptions. I know we had the issue that one of the hiring managers was supposed to have an interview, but they had a family emergency. So they left immediately. And it was after hours. So it was in the evening. So I wasn't at my desk. Back then I was working in the office on top of that. So I only discovered the next day, and the candidate said no one showed up, right? So, but usually if it can happen, but then you get an explanation, you know, it's just not just, sorry, we cancel, sorry, we're gone. That's definitely something else. Or, yeah, it was 40 minutes ago. You're still here, it's fine, you know, like,
Those are extenuating circumstances, though, Juliette. I think anyone with a heart would understand that. But I was sorry, I was in another meeting. To me, that's weak.
So telling. Again, as a candidate, it tells you so much about the company. You know, do you want to work in an environment where it's okay to behave like that between professionals? You know, this is also, so it's, as recruiters, it's also something we need to tell our managers. I mean, some of them who don't understand that, you know, but also
in Glenn's chapter, saying he inspired it, I talk about have a backup plan. Like, you agree in the recruitment alignment meeting, intake strategy, job kickoff, whatever we're calling it, you agree. Okay, so what happens? right? So who's my second? If I have to cancel last minute for an emergency or whatever, who's stepping in? And you have that plan ready to go, and it gets reiterated and reiterated. And I think it just matters more because of the fact there are 5 billion people on the internet now. So they're going to go and bitch, and they've got choice. They've got choice. They don't have to work for you. Even if they're like totally desperate, they would probably rather go and do something freelance and temporary than take your job if you're going to treat them like inhumanely. Actually, Joel Laugi was talking about a second great resignation. I see that coming too, because I think there's a lot of people at the moment who are doing. I know a head of TA who'll definitely do it. She's being paid about half of what she should be being paid.
And a lot of people are being required to come back to office, and they're just like, actually, just no.
Or they'll do it until the market picks back up, and then they'll be off like a shot.
Yeah, I was going to say, people are probably accepting opportunities now that they, in a more buoyant market, wouldn't necessarily consider. And they're accepting those with a view that they have a very clear idea of their exit plan and timeline.
They're transitional roles.
They're transitional roles from the moment they sign the offer letter.
Dirk just said something there. Dirk,
you need to come on screen.
Well, no,
Why is he hiding?
Dirk,
take my place because I have to go run payroll.
All right.
Take care, Debbie.
I'll have fun. Thank you, Debbie.
Bye, love. Well, and step in as a mom. But it was so lovely to be here.
No, you're welcome. You're welcome. There's no pressure on anyone. There's Dirk's picture of my book.
Yeah.
Right. I had a shrine set up to be funny. I guess it didn't go over so well, but I've got Christmas decorations out, and I do origami, so I had all this stuff. And
it's fabulous.
I've got a box coming to you that's got your bird from your cover.
Aww.
So.
Oh, of course.
Yeah, the bird. Yeah. That's very cool. Very cool indeed.
And I'm like, well, yeah, exactly. I'm like, why don't I have a model of that for you? So what we're seeing here in the States, when I caught from the replay of the first show, is we're seeing the venture capital, private equity, board of director types optimizing their companies by eliminating HR entirely.
Yeah.
And now they're following back up with some sort of robocall AI personality index review, and they can't make the hire.
Yeah.
And so we're going to see this trend of let's hire a recruiter, not give them all the tools, and measure on how quick they hire in or don't hire in. But I think you're going to see a new entrepreneur class come up, because if I've got to drive into your space, I'm going to put those dollars against the business so I can get the tax break here in the States, at least, because there's some inequity between, okay, your phone, your computer, your drive time, your parking costs, and then all the things that go into a family support. Like, I had a 19-year-old get sick recently. If I'd have been working and I'd have had to take a day off and explain it. Well, I don't have to do that if I'm remote. But if you're going to make me come in, I'm going to eventually open a bakery. Here in Texas, we have places called bread stores. They just make bread. There's a magazine in the local Home Depot, Lowe's, a hardware store. That's the bread franchise magazine. And it's just beautiful pictures of people making bread. And they're selling bread. They work 9 to 2. They have the rest of the day.
Bread makers start earlier than that.
Oh, yeah, right. But as far as the public, right?
Like 4 a.m.
And they just sell bread. And it's artisan bread. It's the round looking things that come out of cookware.
I love the book. I think again, it's because of the internet. You can see all of those opportunities and go, do you know what? I'm going to go and do Uber Eats. I don't want to. I just don't want to work in a company anymore. I do see that happening.
I think there's an interesting point Dirk makes, and Julie, I don't know if you've seen this as well. Certainly within the startup and scale-up space, and you're right, Dirk. That kind of drive for optimization and efficiency, where obviously after the Silicon Bank kind of crash, the way that kind of VCs and Ps, wanted their portfolio companies to run, it was probably quite evident that HR, talent acquisition, certain parts of ops, finance were going to get rationalized. And now they realize, well, actually, we do need those functions and that capacity and that support. How can we do it cheaper, on the scale. And obviously this is where the whole AI narrative is really being perpetuated.
Well, my last gig, I had to replace a confidential search to replace my boss, who was the SVP of HR. The CEO pulled me aside and said, hey, I have a relationship with her. If you don't want to go outside agency, can you replace her? And I'm like, well, I've got to do it now, because if I don't, I'm going to be part of the secret being spread. So I find a replacement. Surprise, surprise. She was a director, not an SVP. And then she came in and replaced the entire team, and she was paying about half price because her metric was reducing costs. Well, the last recruiter they had that did sales went out on FMLA for job stress. Called me up, says, I'm thinking about killing myself. What do I do? Well, don't do that.
Wow.
Right. And because New Jersey here in the States has a great mental health backup, she could call a person, protect her job, get the help she needed. She's not going back because they're expecting a 22-hour day from these people, because the VC, PE board of directors want to know on a whim, well, what's the market really like in Ohio?
So angry.
You hire someone cheaper for your workday process. Well, the contractors they've hired since have quit within a 60-day window, and they've had to replace their workday analyst twice. And they go, well, what's going on? I get a call from the CEO, because he and I stay in touch. He goes, what am I doing wrong? I go, you're not paying enough.
Where do I start?
That's why I'm not there anymore. You wanted me to come on full time and pay me half. I can't afford that for my dignity alone. Well, what are you doing for money? Well, I've got some, so that's not the issue. You should pay people for what they're worth. Well, do you mind doing me a favor and finding me a sales guy for SaaS? Yeah, I do, unless you're going to pay me. And I don't take gift cards. What I should have done is if you buy 100 copies of Katrina's book, we'll call it even. That might have been smarter than that.
Yeah.
At least 100 copies. But yeah, I mean, I think there's going to be more of that. I think there's so much pressure. Like if you Google, like, what are the like top priorities for CEOs, and it is AI. And it's almost like there's a lot of pressure from the VCs for a lot of these companies to just get it in. So they don't have time to sit back and reflect. So there's a really interesting example in there about the company where when the engineers apply, I mean, it's only a small consultancy, but this man is so arrogant that the applicants get sent straight to a test. And then if you fail the test, the response back from the company is so arrogant and cruel and unnecessarily patronizing. So of course it went nuts, as it does on I think it might have been on Recruiting Hell. I can't remember where it went nuts. But then all of the developers went, you know what, we're going to stick 1-star reviews on the Google Maps, Google Place, whatever it's called, you know, so the guy had to take his Google page down, and you're like, that's going to impact his search engine optimization, the visibility of his company, his ability to do sales, on top of the fact that all these developers won't work for him. Market might be open for developers right now, won't stay that way, and on it goes. And it's all that there's just too much pressure to just roll out AI and cut costs, and it's all of this cutting costs and just forgetting that human beings make the company succeed. No, it doesn't work for any company. It's humans that decide the fate of your company. So
AI can help, but to speed up the process. So of course we also have like English check before for the different countries for specific mass position like QA, front-end engineers. Yes, of course, but it's a specific questions that prepare it, and it's all right. And of course we have AI note taker that can help to speed up the feedback form as well, just for you not to spend a lot of time, just put it to AI and like create a summary after this interview based on this question. So that we need to fill out. And it's increasing the capacity of the recruiter. Of course, it's helping, but it's not, it can't change the way that we are recruiting. Yes.
But that's the point.
Yeah. I think that Hilke, who wrote the foreword, wrote this amazing book. It's got a different cover in the US. So the algorithm, how AI can hijack your career and steal your future. And it looks at the bias in the screening tools and the parsing tools. So brilliant for note-taking and, you know, testing your English skills and those like kind of hard skills. But when it comes to comparing a badly written job description with a badly written resume and parsing
Well,
and
the right place for the government. I was in the U.S. government as a GS-12 when I worked on weapon systems, and AI then required a Cray computer, which would have been thousands of dollars per minute because of the horsepower behind it. You need linguistics as a dictionary to minimize bias, but no one wants to pay for the ontologies of those words to create that level playing field. It's an amazingly short-sighted, lost opportunity. It's like getting the Ferrari keys, but you have Ford Model A driving skills.
Yeah.
That's another good analogy. God, they're coming out.
Thank you.
We're at time, Glenn Martin.
Yeah, I think I also need to go. Thank you very much, Katrina.
Thanks,
Julia.
Thank you very much, and see
Thank
you
you
again.
for popping in. Bye.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye.
I think we're at time, aren't we? Goodness.
All right.
Cool.
Thank you for everybody that popped in. What fun we've had.
Well, you guys did a great job. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Dirk.
Thanks,
And
Dirk.
my wife loved the quote. I showed her the quote out of the post, and she goes, "Oh, you got to buy her a Christmas card."
Oh,
All can I do? That was the thing that impressed her. Not the books that I've written, not the presentation. She goes, "Oh, that's something." Those UK folks don't fart around. So you impressed
That's awesome. Yeah.
we really don't fart around. On that note, thank you.
See you guys. Bye.
Thanks,
Take care,
Glenn.
Dirk.
You've been
All
an
the best.
amazing hostess with the mostest.
Take care, Katrina.
Thanks, Glenn.